Supposedly people are all leaving LA. Like, it's not hot anymore. It's dead. Lots of places are dead, supposedly.
Yeah, well, that's what makes towns interesting. In some ways, LA is the new Detroit.
Oh, well, that could be cool.
My entire lifetime, people have pronounced Detroit dead.
I know, but then it flipped, and then it was like, no, Detroit is cool.
How's Vegas?
Vegas, speaking of, this is another, I should say, welcome to People vs. Algorithms. I'm Brian Marcy. I'm from Las Vegas. No, I'm in Las Vegas for the Consumer Electronics
AB is
Show.
from Las Vegas.
AB is from Las Vegas. That
No,
actually
that's why he's so weird.
That somehow tracks. I know a few people who are from Vegas, and they're a particular type. I'm joined by Troy Young because I had to change the timing of this because I'm going to be fleeing here tomorrow. Alex Schleifer, who always has a hard stop, was unable to join this. He's a little mad about it. And AB is working on some kind of deal, so he won't be here too. So it's just me and you, Troy. We're going to talk about the year ahead. We've got some superlatives. I want to start with a little Vegas report because we talked about distressed cities. Vegas is one of those. I don't know if you've been reading, but Vegas had a really difficult 2025. Tourism is down substantially, particularly in the summer. You know, Vegas is a really interesting place because I do see some similarities with Miami in that it attracts tourists from up and down the socioeconomic ladder. And if you go around the casinos, which unfortunately you will have to when you're on the Strip, okay, because it takes 20 minutes for me to get outside of the MGM Grand because there's 5,000 freaking hotel rooms in this place, which is remarkable.
What about the Tesla tunnel? Did you take the Tesla tunnel?
I did not take the Tesla tunnel. But one of the things that I've noticed is that it caters to the up and down of the income ladder. You've got like high rollers, like there's a lot of like high rolling, like Asian people, I guess, like baccarat, Asian tourists do. They're always like hovering around smoking at the high roller tables or the entrance to the high roller tables. But you can get like, you know, like a $400 steak here, gold encrusted or whatever. But there's also like, you know, you've got like down market options, and then everyone gambles together
at the Golden Nugget for a good
I didn't go, but like everyone then gambles together and like and gets up to hijinks together. And I think that's a really nice thing. I think Vegas itself, and I've only been here for 36 hours, but I'm just going to say, like, I think like a lot of places, and I've seen this in Miami, because of the way the economy has gone and the inequality out there, everyone tries to move to super high end. Everything becomes too expensive. Like going to Las Vegas it's shocking. Like it's the prices people charge for things here are truly absurd. Like they don't give you water in the rooms. I'm at the MGM Grand. This is not a fancy place. It's like $18. You know, they got the magnets on it. It's like $18 for a bottle of water. No wonder. It's like, oh, I don't know why tourists are not coming. Oh, gee, I wonder why. So Vegas needs to fix that. But otherwise, Did you
smoke last night?
I didn't smoke last night, but I might as well have smoked because there's no getting out of the smoke aroma here. I just went down to get a cup of coffee.
You're one of those guys, though. You're like a runner that likes to have the odd fag, huh?
The odd fag. We don't use that word in America. No, not anymore. I mean, I did, but I'm 53. You should not smoke over the age of 35. You can have the occasional cigarette before you're 35, and then I think you gotta just stop. It's not worth it, you know, unless you're fully addicted. Then, you know, smoke and just take 10 years off your life expectancy.
Right.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. I know my mom was telling me a story of some family relative who smoked constantly, and it's like, you know, whatever, Mildred, this is going to kill you. She's like, whatever, I enjoy it. It's fine. I'll take the trade. She was going into it with eyes wide open. So anyway,
is Vegas a cousin of your hometown, Miami?
Philly? No.
Miami, your new hometown.
Oh, I mean, I think that there's similarities in that they have tourism dependent economies, but Miami has far more going on, I believe, than Las Vegas. And Las Vegas, to be fair, I'm really interested in Las Vegas outside of the Strip because I'm reminded of coming to a place like this. Everyone loves to hate on Las Vegas. Like everyone I meet at CES, they're like, "Oh, CES again." It's really strange that people like not all, but most people I talk to, and I think it's like a sort of a social thing. They want to complain about having to be in like Las Vegas. And nobody does that with Miami. People love to go to Miami, but I think it's a classist thing with Las Vegas to hate on Las Vegas. And to be fair,
Last
I do that myself.
I was thinking about you last night. I watched the night before. I watched the Michael Mann Miami Vice movie from, I don't know, what was it, the 90s? Have you seen that? Starring Colin Farrell,
I haven't
Jamie
seen it.
Foxx, John Ortiz, Gong Li.
I stick with the Don Johnson, Philip Thomas Jr. I'm fine with the original. I don't think we need to remake pretty much all the things that we remake. I don't need that. I'm good with just sticking with the original.
Colin Farrell
I do have
is an Irish actor playing the Don Johnson character.
It's okay. The Irish people can do that. Americans can't put on other accents, but the Australians are amazing doing American. I think half of Hollywood is Australian. Do you ever have that, like an actor would all of a sudden talk at like the Oscars or something you haven't heard, and then you're like, oh my God, they're Australian too? No idea. The Sphere. I have a view of the Sphere. I'm a Sphere maxer. I've never been to the Sphere. I love it as a concept. James Dolan, not great at running a basketball team, but great job with the Sphere. It's the most amazing ad canvas. I have a view of it outside of my room, and Google has like taken over it a lot during CES, and great spending. I would love to run an ad on the Sphere.
Did you go out last night?
Very expensive. No, I didn't. I mean, I went out to just for a dinner after, because I had an event here, Troy. Let me just say real quickly, thank you to Index Exchange. They hosted the Innovators Unscripted. It was a video podcast. It was the first video podcast I did, and it was really cool. We talked about agentic advertising. Do you know this?
I've spoken to an executive at Omnicom about its potential 2 days ago. Yeah,
right. The word potential is a lot of work there.
They're starting to execute agentic trades.
Well, this is like it's like basically it's stuck on the workflow level. Any ad tech sort of innovation, first you have to come up with a buzzy term, agentic, check. Then you have to argue for 12 to 18 months over what that term means. And then you have people who roll out a solution using that term, and then they argue with other people saying, no, your agentic is not truly agentic. Well, and really the divide comes down to whether it's going to stay at the workflow level or whether it's really going to get into the decisioning, right. And that is, everyone uses AI and agentic and all this stuff for like workflow automation, basically. But is it going to get to the decisioning? That's when.
Well, I mean, maybe a slightly less cynical take. Of course, it is at some point. I was speaking to the inimitable Randall Rothenberg, who was on his way to Vegas. Who, if you see, say hello to him there. Who, as you know, has sort of birthed a new kind of trade organization to, support or to kind of help people in the transition to the new sort of AI agentic world in advertising, something entirely focused on that mega trend. And he likened it, I thought, interestingly, to the future of advertising was sort of akin to, music, orchestration software, the kind of software that people use to mix, manage, and make music. And that, it's much more than, a dashboard in the future, that you can kind of manipulate campaigns, for reach, frequency, performance variables and stuff in a way that, like you're kind of orchestrating a score for something. And that the plug-in economy that's a big part of these music management software packages is something that we'll eventually see in advertising, where you can, plug in different reach models and kind of conduct this sort of advertising symphony. And that what is downstream from this change is like the way that it affects, how we think broadly about advertising is like wildly profound. Whether or not it takes, 5 years or 10 years, probably the longer timeline is what you'll see, but that the changes are just radical. So
Well, radical over the long term. Okay, yeah, over the long term, we're all dead too. Yeah, it's going to take a lot. To me, I'm a narrative guy, so it ends up coming back to when it comes to AI and advertising and then agentic, you're going to have the people who own the compute basically coming up with their surprise black box solution that everything is going to outcomes. And they're going to say, hey, you don't want to mess with all this stuff. You don't want to have your hands on the knobs. Give us the money. Tell us what your outcomes are, what the price is. We're going to do it, and we're going to come back and we're going to mark our own homework, and we're going to always get A's, and you're going to look good to your CFO. And that's a really compelling offer. And on the other side, you have this quote unquote open web, which isn't just publishers, it's CTV and streaming and out of home and whatnot. And they are going to fight with each other. It's the analogy that I heard used was the smart home. Like sort of smart home failed because all the different players were not interoperable. And so for this to truly live up to its potential, and maybe that's what Randall sees with yet another trade organization, is that it is going to require something that, at least in my time hovering around this industry, it is not very good at, which is any form of cooperation. And that is why there is a oligopoly in digital advertising, because they don't have to mess with this. But let's see, time will tell. We're going to do some superlatives this
well,
week,
in
right?
kind of semi-related but unrelated news, did you see that your friends at Semafor just raised $30 million at a $330 million valuation?
Good for them.
Nice, right?
All that for an events business. That's great. I didn't actually see that. I've got a time change here. I was in line at Starbucks for 40 minutes. By the way, Starbucks has a $10 mocha latte.
Emily from Feed Me tweeted that if media companies are valued at 165 times EBITDA, then she has some calls to make, as would you at the rebooting.
165 times EBITDA?
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk. No earnouts, though. You get the email list.
I'll hand you the keys. Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's good for Semafor. I'll have to dig into the details.
What's the bull case there, Brian? What's the bull case in your mind?
I think the bull case for Semafor is CES, basically. I mean, it's can you pull off? Because when you come to somewhere like CES, 140,000 people descend here, right? And no technology publisher, it's put on by a tech association, and maybe that's the way it always is. But publishers look at these massive event franchises and they're like, why don't we have that? Why wouldn't one of the why didn't Adweek come up with Cannes? Why couldn't media brands have these? This is a gigantic business. And so maybe the Semafor, I mean, if I were to grade them, I don't think that they have a ton of journalistic impact right now. I don't think that they're driving conversations in their sectors. I think Max Tanney does a great job in media, but media is whatever. For their kind of business, they need to have massive impact in Washington, in Silicon Valley, in global capitals. And I don't necessarily see that. I don't know if you do. I don't feel that exactly. Do you? But I don't know if it matters. It seems like they're executing well.
I mean, if you were going to contrast it with Puck, I think that there's depth in certain verticals, Hollywood probably being the most successful with Matt Bellany, where they become essential to how people do their work. And that's kind of what you want in a subscription business. I think that as time goes on... They're not
subscriptions.
I know. Yeah, I'm saying that as time goes on, it's going to be harder and harder for Semafor to kind of, find meaningful subscription money after it's been free for a long time. It's really hard to kind of tack back and make that happen. I do, however, think that they can have, a quality free editorial product anchored in, different important regions in the world and have that kind of monetized through a Davos-like, a set of event franchises. And I think that if they manage to, events are interesting. The genesis of events are really important. Like if you get it right to begin with, and it sort of cascades out from that kind of genesis moment, and people aspire to be there because you had the important decision makers and thought leaders, et cetera, at your event, then I think that you can build really, really valuable franchises like they did at, in Davos. So I think there's potential there. Obviously someone sees it. Those guys have done a good job, obviously, of taking the business to market. Let's see. I think it's nice to see a positive financing story come out, happen inside of media, because there's so much bad news. So it's a good thing.
I agree. Yeah. Hey, look, I'm just the voice of realism, Troy. I'm on everyone's side, I guess. Look, at Davos, this is a good example, and this is I think the promise and the challenge of these kind of models. Semafor they're doing live journalism on the promenade. I mean, you're a Davos guy, right? You went 1 year at least.
I went last.
I don't know what that means. No, I got a few notes. It's like, will you be in Davos? I'm like, no, I'm at CES. That's my speed. They're doing like 7 different events. They got Ray Dalio there with the CEO signal. They've got a Semafor house. They're doing at least the Semafor media party. They're doing 6, 7 events there. This is a high octane type of events business that I talked with Sarah Personette, the CEO at Puck, and it was interesting because I brought up Semafor. And she positioned themselves.
I love this counterpoint that you got to on that pod.
Yeah, and she said she has seen media. I think she was talking to Refinery 29. She's seen media companies kill their margins when it comes to events and I think that is, again, she was the COO at Refinery, and they had that 29 rooms experiential unit. Mm-hmm. And I know during that time, and I think consumer media companies often are terrible at events. They run them at the margins that they can. I hear this at my dinner, and they're like talking about like doing events with like margins in the teeth. I'm like, are you kidding me? I mean, from a B2B perspective, hell no. Events should be
but the Refinery event that probably influences her take on this was, in a lifestyle category was, didn't have, high value B2B audiences and was monetized with advertising, not with paid attendance. Big difference.
Yeah. And I mean, look, a lot of events were like propping up ad businesses, and, and some, I mean, I know Puck likes to say, hey, you got to have a media commitment in order to do one of these events that are basically agency services at the end of the day. A lot of these events, particularly in the Washington and Hollywood markets, are similar to, frankly, to the gatherings that I'm doing here. That's what I did with Index Exchange last night. After this, I'm going back over to the Cosmopolitan to do one with my friends at Exco, series of video podcasts. It's getting the right people in the room, and that is what B2B does. And I think a lot of these kinds of publications, they don't like to use the word B2B. They want the benefits of B2B, but they think it's a little gauche. They call themselves business to professional, which I find ludicrous, but they want to have that. And it's all about getting the right people in the room. So I think I've always found consumer publications struggle at B2B. They don't really get the assignment. When I hear live journalism, I start to wonder, because you got to know your assignment. It is matching up a buy and a sell side in B2B. If live journalism gets you there, fantastic, but know your assignment. But good for Semafor.
Predictions. I liked your predictions.
Okay, so how are we going to do this? We're going to do. I tried to make them into a bit of a superlative. Not to. I don't mean to go totally negative here. Actually, no. Let's start with the optimism, because this actually came up in a conversation I had here, which is the unlikely comeback of the year story. I think it could be Yahoo. Okay, like let me. And I know you're close to. What are you? Are you like a consigliere of Yahoo? What are you? I don't know. You run in similar private equity circles, right?
I'm fans of. I mean, where I worked on the deal as an advisor, and fans of the Apollo guys that led the deal, and know the management team well. I like.
Is that Reed Raymond? He's my favorite private equity person.
he's the iconic reference point for private equity in media. Yeah,
he's my main character.
Reed did it. He did it. He did a nice deal.
Yeah.
But I have spoken in fairness, I have spoken to people there, and I do keep in touch with them. And I think that there's a bunch of things that are really interesting bubbling up inside a Yahoo, whether or not it's enough of a narrative to support, a public process, TBD. But I think there's a couple things that will contribute to an interesting opportunity for them. The first is that, it's a nicely profitable business. The second is that the ad tech side of it, which is now primarily the DSP, for years and years and years is losing a lot of money. It used to be an SSP and a native ad platform and a DSP. And now they're really focused on the DSP and writing the cost structure and focused on CTV in particular. And what they have that's really nice on that side is they have, something like 80 or 90% of their audience is authenticated. So they have a nice data set on that others don't have. So to the extent that Yahoo authenticated data set can aid performance, it's a really nice advantage as a DSP for next generation video CTV. So I think that is a source of great potential. They're competing against large, powerful, entrenched competitors in Amazon and Trade Desk, but lots of potential there. I think that you'll see them this year launch a renewed search product that probably looks more like Perplexity. So AI kind of search. And I think that if they can channel enough of their surfaces into, people coming into kind of new Yahoo search that would give them, this little window to make something that would compete in some small sliver of a way against Google, and they can build audience there. It's so ludicrously, profitable to be able to kind of, sell that audience and the intent behind it, that's a big opportunity. I think that, they're one of the few that still has both kind of content aggregation and utility, such that they're less dependent on referral sources like Google and so
that's it.
They have mail, they have finance, they have fantasy sports, they have a very robust, sports aggregation site. There's a lot there. So if they can start to build other utilities around that, they have a nice little gaming sort of segment to their business. They have, they're good at shopping stuff, and they bought a little AI company to make their shopping stuff work better. I think they can do weather well. You probably see them integrate prediction markets into their interfaces, like we'll see lots of media do in 26. So there's opportunities, I think, for Yahoo. Plus, it makes good
for sure. I mean, I think they have a front door that, people moved on from portals, right? But they have a front door with mail, with finance, with sports, with news that is reliable traffic. And this becomes more valuable in a time of volatility. They're also hosting a party here tonight with Public Enemy. So they rented Flava Flav. I assume Chuck D is going to come. I didn't know he did these corporate gigs, but good for them. I mean, take the eye.
Yeah, Jim likes to put a band together and do a show. He's always done it. He used to do it.
They put on Ragers. They had a Rager
in Cannes.
At Cannes last year. I didn't go, but they did. They did a really nice job with the Yahoo motel motif. They do some nice things. So that is my unlikely comeback of the year. Do you have one, or should I keep going down this list?
Well, my whole take on this was a longer sort of Troy essay. So I don't know whether you want to do that now or later, but I was just thinking of kind of where are we at in media, and what did 25 represent, and where are we going in 26, and so that was the spirit of what I had thought about for this show. There are individual itemized predictions, but it's the longer narrative.
Okay, let's get that's more interesting. I was following Alex's lead. I should just
Alex
tell you guys what we're gonna do.
Alex was angry with me and with you that we willy-nilly changed the date, but he did make the point that Reddit is going to continue to come on strong in 26, so we'll just register that. But I had been thinking, Brian, and part of it is my love affair with YouTube and everything it represents. Part of it was some stats that I read about Hulu Plus and Disney Plus and Hulu kind of summing to under 4% via according to Nielsen of the streaming market, compared to the 12+% US number for YouTube. Interestingly,
is that in time or in revenue?
That's the Nielsen viewership number.
Okay.
And And if you look at like web, just like kind of web metrics, YouTube is like order of magnitude larger than any of the streamers. If you look, globally, it's an order of magnitude larger, and obviously completely different kind of economic structure. But I was thinking about where we are in media, and I started with this idea of influencers, which feels like a term that needs to stay, behind, right? Like it's a goofy term, and it came because, outside of the kind of media complex, there were people, I guess, that influenced taste and opinion, but I think the term stuck because they influenced outcomes and advertisers anointed them influencers. And then we kind of went to the creator moniker, and I don't know, I guess that fell somewhere between like God the creator and Tyler the creator, but it didn't really feel like a real kind of legitimate, it didn't have that sort of je ne sais quoi of a media person, but they were people, I guess, that made things. But I just started coming back to like what I spend time on and what makes me feel really good outside of, like we all like to watch, the odd bit of professional entertainment, whether it's a movie, an old movie or a television show or whatever. I'm finding myself less attracted to that. And I've been perplexed, quite frankly, by what it takes to run a long-term profitable streaming service, like how much kind of volume and you kind of have to pump into something like that to create the magnetism, the engagement magnetism that's required to sustain and grow a subscription service. And it feels really tough to me. And it also, I'm always reminded of lessons of kind of digital media when I think about where the streamers are at, because they seem to face the same challenges that we did as publishers, but 10 years later. And I just thought about like all these people in YouTube, and it's like a relevant story now because we see the like, enterprising news guy. What was that guy's name that broke the Minnesota daycare fraud story?
He didn't break it, but Nick Shirley did some.
Yeah,
like,
right. He's
man on
the
the
young
street,
Mormon dude.
local news reporting. Dude, X was like, "Oh my God, this is revolutionary." It's like, okay, it looks like a local news.
But what I love about the YouTube guy, I mean, that guy's just one example, but there's the experts and the enthusiasts that I really like. There's the content marketers that I have no issue with when they do it well. Like there's that men's brand Huckberry. They're like super ambitious on YouTube, and they do these kind of vignettes from around the world. They do food, they do home, and they like do a really good job of it. And then there's like these semi-professional, producers, a new generation of them that make little docs, and showrunners, and B2B people, and the annoying VC people, and the funny people, and then all of the reprocessed kind of nostalgia, traditional media content that's bite-sized and right-sized and algorithmically filtered for me on YouTube. I love YouTube, right? And so it's all the people. It's the Adam Savages, the Marcus Brownlees, the Patrick O'Shaughnessy's, the Amy Poehler's, Pablo Torres. There's so many. And I don't know what we call these people. I don't know what you call them. I don't know if they're video people or content producers, but, the energy of the world, funneled through a very capable algorithm against what I think the thing that makes us human, which is just like our interest and our passion and our enthusiasm for things in life and ideas, really to me is manifest in that marketplace. And I just think that against that, like, it just says a lot about where media is at. Like that, those kinds of marketplaces to me are the future. And I know that we talk about endlessly about, the rise of the individual and the importance of these kind of small units of production in media. It's all of that, but it's come to video, right? And so I think marketplaces dominate, and like content first lean structures are essential. And like these messy experts beat polished pros, and, community is always and still and going forward more really important in media. And that like horizontal products like YouTube always beat, the individual efforts of media companies. And you need these crazy sophisticated ad systems, to work there. And that, when it's not that, it's media against a diversified revenue stream, like something that Apple or Amazon has. And Or it's like live and sports, which is increasingly, the province of massively scaled, deep pocketed tech companies. And so I think against that, if I was looking ahead, to me, 25 represented the year that like we are the people are the media, but now, it's manifest in video, and that Netflix has a little bit of a shot at kind of playing against YouTube because they have scale and they make good products, but they'll slowly open to contributors because they need to. The funny thing is that like CBS News, Barry Weiss ultimately gets an ulcer trying to fix like an irrelevant franchise in CBS News. And her focus should be like on 60 Minutes, extending it across channels and formats to reach new generations, because it does show up in the feed a lot on YouTube. And it's a format that can work there. I think you probably see Disney elevating the park guy, Josh D'Amaro, over, legacy content, Dana's legacy content leadership. I think Paramount, needs to find the next chapter, and they lose Warner. So they need to do something with you name it. Is it Apple? Is it Amazon? Is it some reconfiguration of NBC? Maybe mainstream sports, which is the old Diamond Sports, regional sports networks. I don't know. I think that podcasts can continue to thrive, but few win the kind of video talk show crossover game. And I think Netflix will struggle there. I think the digital publishers in 26, they actually, the few that really have, quality reporting will prosper, which is kind of a Back to the Future story where there's kind of
so name names. I want you to name names.
Well, they're all the ones that we always
take the other
name,
end
Brian.
of it. I know you're the optimist, the inveterate optimist, but I think it's going to be a difficult year. We're going to see a lot of
Wall Street Journal, New York Times, FT,
Okay.
Economist, The Atlantic, The New Yorker. Maybe you could throw some indies in there like Puck. I'm not saying indies don't thrive. I think they do, actually, because they are the main characters in the platform game. But there are a kind of fortified few that are on the other side of the subscription scale challenge. And the one thing that you said to me that always resonates in this kind of big picture diatribe, which I will wrap up now, is that everyone else gets sold, rationalized, or reinterpreted as some kind of harvestable IP. Your glue factory line that you've said lots of times, that always irked me, to be honest, because I thought that was a terrible way to characterize hardworking media people and the brand represent. And it was a lot of the brands, by the way, that I worked on for a long time. So, but I think you're right. You're 100% right. They're all going to the glue factory. And guess what?
is going to the glue factory this year.
They're all going to the glue factory, Brian, and they're valuable in the glue factory because we need glue. And we need two-dimensional brands to stick on top of lots of things, right? Whether it's this, the Fortune experience or the accolade from Forbes or, whatever, the underarm deodorant from, Elle, you name it. And so, I think they do find purpose. But to me, 26 is this inflection point where we start, truly stop thinking about these kind of hallowed media companies as trusted institutions. And media power just resides in systems and interfaces and the legions who create for love and money.
Yeah, I think that's the default assumption that we'll start to
I guess this is just, I guess just what everybody thinks. But
because I don't even so Will Welch just left. He was a global editorial director at GQ. I did a podcast with him one time. I asked him about whether I could wear joggers into the office. He said, "You might not want to. There could be an outline." So I thought that was kind of funny. But he left.
Maduro was wearing joggers to the office and then ultimately to prison, which became a big meme.
Yeah. So no joggers. I stuck to the jeans. But he just left. A great position. He's been at Condé forever to move to Paris to work for like Pharrell. This is like, you see a lot of times in.
Well, it's the human equivalent of everything I just said, right? It's like the media person becomes the front end for the fashion brand.
And I think we'll start to see that kind of crossover becomes, the norm where that's why I like the term media person, because you can be a media person and not be, oftentimes you are not a journalist or like a quote unquote profession. You might be doing something else. And to me, that is what is going to be when we talk about the creator economy. I think we're going to start to see just a continued focus on those who are not necessarily, substackers, but people who are experts at a craft who are then able to communicate that. The Lenny Rachitskis. Like I have a podcast coming out with CJ Gustafson. I love his business. He's basically the Lenny Rachitsky of CFOs. Okay. This is an unbelievably valuable segment. CJ does like a $3 million top line for like a solo business and like probably has a couple $100,000 in costs. That is a business. Everyone will talk about Emily Sundberg's Feed Me. Emily's done a nice job with that. CJ's got a way, 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 way better business. There are tons of CJs out there and they're building really good businesses. It's not as sexy as the Feed Me's and the other thing, but that is where, you mentioned Patrick O'Shaughnessy. He's got a really great media property going on there, and like that to me, the Acquired Guys did a podcast with Michael Lewis about Acquired as a business, and another fantastic business with how they're building it. Fine, that they got Escape Velocity. They're, the number one probably tech podcast out there. But those to me are the really powerful media businesses. I mean, I will still focus on the managing decline part of the market. But when you're looking for growth, that to me is where I look to.
Mm-hmm. So nice. You buy it. I
mean, absolutely. I buy it. One other just note on what you said. Okay, well, because I think just to jump off on that, because you mentioned Nick Shirley, I think what we are going to see this year is that a new information space main characters emerge who are using the trappings of investigative reporting and often have an agenda. I mean, Nick Shirley is a young guy who used to be like a prank YouTuber, in like high school. He's a native species of the information space. He uses investigative reporting with this Minnesota social services fraud scandal. He has an explicit point of view. And you see this, James O'Keefe, is a great example of this kind of activism as investigation. And to me, this is a continuation of, we have seen a lot of self-interested parties who use the trappings of journalism in order to compete with journalism. Everyone is out there in the information space competing. And I think that we are going to see it's always been on the sort of commentary. So that's what I'm watching for.
I want to add to your point and kind of get your take of this.
Okay.
This notion of agenda to me was, everybody has an agenda, right? And when you think about like all of the, kind of criticisms leveled at people that use media or content to advance, some, self-interested, objective. You have, people criticizing Michael Wolff for his tactics to get close because Michael Wolff has an agenda of getting the inside story. We have people accusing Barry Weiss of having an agenda because she censored 60 Minutes, presumably in support of, her friends in Washington. You have an army of traders on Polymarket, all of whom have an agenda, all of whom have, it's unclear, how they are potentially trading with advantage, right? Which goes against how we think about, fairness in markets. There's like content marketers. We used to despise content marketers because, of course, they have an economic agenda. But like in the great big sea of the information space, everybody has an agenda. But it all kind of levels out because we know it.
Yeah.
And there's different
I don't think it's
sides.
a bad thing. No conflict, no interest is the way of is the way, And because what happens is you get assigned an agenda no matter what. And whether it's true or not, it doesn't really matter. And that is just part of the hurly-burly of everyone trying to compete for influence. And
that said, I think that the only thing that the remaining kind of legitimate subscription supported scaled media brands have is trust. But even there, we're convinced that they have an agenda. The New York Times has an agenda, but I think that there are a few places that we will go to try to look at things more objectively. But outside of that, everybody has an agenda.
It's like Hunter Brook. Great model. They're taking the trappings of investigative journalism and they're marrying it to short selling. So and short sellers are a form of investigative journalists. That's what they do. I mean, people hate on they got rebranded activist investors. Short sellers are basically, they're doing the hard work. Opposition research. So many investigative pieces in Washington originate with opposition research firms. I mean, Fusion GPS was started by a guy who was a Wall Street Journal investigative reporter. These skills will be used. And when people say, well, what's going to happen to the reporting? Well, this could be an answer, right? Like, I know that a lot of people will not like to hear that with Nick Shirley's. Well, guess what? Progressives are going to have their own Nick Shirley's. Like, none of this, it's not going to stop here. Just the same way on the commentary layer, progressives have developed their own outlets. This is going to happen here. And, people are going to have to kind of gauge for themselves who to trust. And that is why, but this is my term of the year. Are you ready for this?
Yes.
It's legibility. Okay. I've noticed this pop up a lot more in tech circles, right? But I think legibility is actually an interesting concept in that.
Explain it.
I believe that the attention economy is ending. I'm going to see Joe Marchese later, and he's going to disagree with me because he's got a book coming out about the attention economy. I think the attention economy turned us all into that tube man who's outside of car dealerships, that big inflatable guy whose arms go up and down and gets your attention. And that's really low. Attention capital is very low valued. And it's made for a world of impressions. Legibility, and I think that's what you see in the information spaces, people go out there and they want to attach some concept or name or some concept to themselves, right? And they become known for that. They put an idea out there and then that becomes associated with them and they derive influence, sometimes power, sometimes money from that. But it's important to be legible these days. Operating behind the scenes is not as powerful. That's why I think you see a lot of the most powerful people who are out there being content creators on a regular basis because they need to become legible. And so I think that is going to be a big shift that we'll see this year, and that you have to become associated with it. You think about Ben Thompson, aggregation theory. He's been dining out on that thing for over a decade. I mean, good for him. Otherwise, and I think what you're saying, and this is where I'm just kind of less into it, is otherwise you're in the sort of media equivalent of the casino capitalism game that is spreading through most of the economy. You feed your content into the YouTube, you feed it into TikTok, and you hope it pops. I mean, that is my issue with YouTube and why I can't. It's the thumbnails, It's Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast is not inspiring, He's a guy who really rose by being really good at grinding through the optimization and being fairly shameless about it. I don't think that Mr. Beast I don't think he's the model sort of going forward. He's a tube man out there getting attention.
Yeah, I mean, the coloring YouTube with Mr. Beast is a misunderstanding of what it is. But anyway, let's go on to some of your other.
Okay, so the other one, just because you brought up prediction markets, the new elite moral panic is going to be over prediction markets and gambling. Dave Ramsey just has a viral video about the scourge of sports betting. I think when we look back, and I'm going to pat myself on the back here on this one, Troy. On this podcast, I said that we will look back on legalizing sports gambling as a massive mistake. I said this over a year ago, so I was very early to this. I know. I went to school in New England. If you had given those guys legalized sports gambling on their phone, forget it. They would have never graduated. We are gonna, I think we're already seeing this sort of story. We love a moral panic, right? And I think this one is kind of justified. We have mainstreamed a lot of forms of gambling. Prediction markets is a form of gambling. There's going to be legal crackdowns on that. The amount of insider trading that is going on, and also just the grossness of placing bets on like war and things of that nature are going to cause us to sort of, I think, cause a lot of people to step back and be like, is this the kind of society that we truly want? While I understand the argument that prediction markets are a way of getting at truth, I just think inevitably these are detestable brands, and Kalshi, Polymarket, FanDuel, DraftKings, the rest of them, they're the new cigarette companies. And I think that is going to be something that is going to become apparent in 2026. I know you're on their side. You private equity guys love this kind of stuff, right?
How do I feel about it? I haven't thought about it enough, but I do think that you're probably wrong. Yeah. Cigarette companies have, done just fine, and they've morphed into different products that are slightly less harmful. I think that we're defined as creatures by both our virtue and our sin. And I think we need to sin. And I think that, having a cigarette as a runner is a small way of expressing that.
I was already, by the way, I came out being pro occasional cigarette until you hit 35, and then you got to grow up.
Okay. I think that expressing your opinion, belief, or just your love of the game in a financial incentive isn't a terrible thing. And I'll give, I see a slightly different side of it, and I'll get to this in Good Product, but I led a group of people to go to the Buffalo game against your Eagles in the pouring rain in Buffalo. And, we gathered at the bar.
Did you break a table?
No, I wanted to, but it was, the weather wasn't cooperative. We gathered at a bar before the game, and we all worked together to put our bets down. And it made the game really
lovely
fun.
Family moment. Okay, so I didn't think about the sports gambling bringing families together angle.
Right.
So thank you for that.
All right. What else you got?
All right. So the premature death of the year is going to be, again, New York and San Francisco. We're in a new Miami cycle, and I think Patrick Collison, one of the Stripe brothers, I love all the rich people from California are rediscovering the wonders of empanadas and arepas right when they passed the billionaires tax in California. They're like, Florida's really great. And so this will lead to a new cycle about whether Miami can compete for tech companies and for finance. I don't believe it'll ever really happen. I think Miami's a great place to have a second or third office and, give it to people as like a lifestyle arbitrage, but building a massive tech company or, it's just not going to happen in Miami. But I do think that this year, New York and San Francisco are going to do just fine. San Francisco's got a new mayor. I guess he's been in for a year. I haven't been in a couple of years, but he is apparently doing a nice job over there. I think that most of the whiny billionaire set, or I don't even know, is David Sachs a billionaire? I have no idea. I think that they'll either move to Austin or the ones that stay will be like Jensen Huang, and he'll be like he'll take the PR bonus by saying, "Oh yeah, it's fine. I don't really think about it at all." New York, Mamdani, he's going to be unbelievably popular in 2026. The hangover doesn't happen in the first year. He's going to have a great honeymoon. You already see it. Like I saw all this like fawning coverage over him fixing some bump on the bottom of the William Street Bridge where, I don't know, you would cycle over and you'd have to go over a bump. And, they got the shots of him filling in some I guess concrete. That's going to be all year. He's not going to go after, he's not going to do the stuff that's going to piss off like a ton of people in the first year. There's going to be bike lanes. It's going to be exciting and everything. The bill never comes until later. And socialism is going to get a second look yet again in 2026. It is going to become extremely popular. We are going to move incrementally, and I know Alex will love this, from these idiotic culture wars to far more dangerous class wars. And so I do not believe we'll see an exodus from New York and San Francisco for Austin and Miami. That is my prediction for next year. I also do not think that we are going to see the job apocalypse. I think we are the frog in the boiling water. Every research that I see says that people running big companies plan to keep hiring basically flat next year, and we'll see the unemployment rate drift higher. But the idea that there's going to be some AI cliff, I love the AI maximalists, and I love listening to them and their sort of crazy predictions. I just don't believe that. I don't believe these things happen that quickly. So no job apocalypse.
Well, if anything, the tech guys that seemingly take up more and more of the media spectrum every year, are guilty of extending what they would annoyingly call their first principles thinking into, logical conclusions. We saw this over the break when Dwarkesh Patel and another guy wrote an essay about the trade between capital and labor, and how wealth would when no one worked and robots did everything, wealth would naturally accumulate to labor and there would be no leverage, or to capital rather.
Capital. Yeah.
And
right now, capital is basically takes 2/3 any labor.
Well, I'm reminded of 99, 2000 when everybody that worked in a burgeoning new group of services companies called digital agencies, which at the time were brand new, and everybody that participated in kind of the early phase of e-commerce on the internet believed that in a short period of time, we would only conduct commerce on the internet. And, obviously it became a big part of how it augmented how we purchase and how it changed how companies service us and all of that. But we still go to stores. And when I walk out of my house today, there are, people at restaurants. The robots are not coming this year. The robots are not coming next year. There's the people at the restaurants, at the dry cleaner, at the bank, people looking at deals, people reading the paperwork, people making the ads, all of the coordination, the taste, the risk mitigation. This notion that we're going to see 30% unemployment is bananas.
Yeah, no, I agree. I go back to, Amazon started drone delivery. They're testing drone delivery in Dallas. And they started this late in 2025. And I remember 2007, 60 Minutes had Jeff Bezos on talking about drone delivery. And he was like, it's right around the corner. And look, I'm a Jeff Bezos fan, except for how he spends his off time. I think that's unbecoming. I don't know if you saw that St. Bart's. Anyway, it seems like a terrible way to live. He's got to end this midlife crisis. It's gone on too long. But if he's off by 18 years, I think this is going to take a long time. I totally agree. The robot is not going to be emptying the dishwasher for another several years. I did see a lot of robots around here. It is CES, so I'm very pro robot. That to me is way more exciting than a lot of the AI talk. I'm into the idea of us having robots all around us. The delivery robots in Miami, they're still lost a lot of times. They still don't seem like they know where they're going. Dogs continue to confound them.
Well, in your list, two other things, Brian, two other things stood out that I would like you to touch on, and they're related. One is the longest running fight with no resolution, the battle for sovereignty. And the second was, the one I liked, was the most unlikely culture war, the Pope versus AI and MAGA. Can you talk about those two?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I think, I've been tracking this new Pope, the Wawa Pope, as I like to call him. Some people call him the American Pope. Some people call him the Bulls Pope. But he is the first Pope, I haven't confirmed this, who has been to a Wawa because he went to Villanova. So I think it's a safe bet. He's a media figure at the end of the day. And that's why I focus on it, because if you think about what is a pope in 2026, he's a moral figure who uses media to create leverage. It's become very apparent that he is looking to take the Catholic Church's traditional pro-life stance that has been associated with opposing abortion and sometimes the death penalty, but to apply it far more broadly to areas that are going to run him completely against MAGA, because AI seen through this lens is an affront to human dignity. Immigration, he's already challenging the Trump administration on immigration, and he is going to be a figure to watch in 2026. I think, popes are not as influential as obviously as they used to be, but I think that is a fight. I mean, Trump is not known to shy away from a fight. So I think Trump versus the Pope in 2026 is on my prediction list.
Talk a little bit about your sovereignty prediction, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah. Okay. So I think the battle for sovereignty is, I talked about this for 2025, and it is going into 2026, because all individuals and companies are trying to find a way that they can establish some form of sovereignty and not be held to the whims of larger systems in which they operate within. And that's why, for all the wonders of YouTube, operating within that ecosystem, you have a lot of trade-offs, right? And those who can are going to claw back as much sovereignty as they can, rather in media, rather than try to operate within the whims of these systems. It's going to be really difficult if you're like a publisher whose main atomic unit is web pages. You don't have a ton of sovereignty, but individuals will try to find ways that they can establish some degree of sovereignty in the marketplace. And that's where I go back to legibility. It's we've seen time and again that the pathways that, we were always told to take have all of a sudden, been closed off. And so I think that leads to a reassessment of how much you can trust institutions. And we've seen this, that more people will look to exit to some degree and to find a way that they can be autonomous. So I believe that we will see that, and it's an ongoing struggle.
The king of quote unquote first principle thinking, Elon Musk, did something that seemingly was of consequence, but is maybe a harbinger of things to come. Certainly was really about interface and the removal of friction in connecting a content creation, portal X to AI. And so I don't know if you saw this, Brian, but it was about putting the Grok remix button on every single image on X. So, not something that you couldn't do by simply taking an image and going to a Gen AI image processor and, manipulating it however you want. Obviously, you can do it in lots of ways, but now you can take any image in the feed, press a button, and you can put, AOC in a bikini. Or you can,
Right.
You can do whatever you want. And there's been, a lot of uproar for good reason, because there's, people do really tasteless things when they can. And there's lots of idiots everywhere.
Well, I mean, go figure. I mean, who could have seen that happen?
On another
level. But this is also this is human sovereignty. Do you not have a right to be able to exist in this world without some creep taking your clothes off virtually and then posting it on the internet? Again, I go back to, is this the society that we want?
Yeah. And in other ways, it seems like a complete inevitability.
I know. I'm torn on it, because I'm there's no way that, it's I understand the arguments that will be made in favor of it. I find them gross, but I understand that they will be made for sure.
Right.
They're just going to say, oh, okay, well, people have been thinking that all the time. This is just a human thinking this. And yeah.
Anyway, I just think it's important for so many reasons, not the least of which is, the decisions we make with interface are just, the most important things that we do now, because that changes behavior.
Do you think there's a possibility that we have a return of like ethics? Because I think about this because Victor, do you know Victor Wembanyama? He's a really tall French guy. He's probably the best basketball player on the planet right now. He came up with this idea of ethical basketball, and basically it's an answer against all the flopping and the James Harden stuff of basketball has gone through its own optimization phase where everything has become over optimized. I mean, I'm a big Sixers fan, but watching yeah, he's like 7'5", but he's European, so that they actually teach them.
My
to play
son loves him
basketball,
because he
like,
says he actually reads books.
I think he does read books. Yeah, he's very articulate. And so he wants to come up with ethical basketball. He says the Spurs are doing a version of ethical basketball. They're moving the ball. They're unselfish. They're not just trying to get to the foul line, and they're not just grinding the stats. They're playing basketball, quote unquote, the right way. And you see it's a very European concept. I think there's a lot of like unwritten rules in soccer and European sports like that we don't have like in our American style. And I think that could be a thing that makes a comeback. I would like to, because, we get all into like regulations. We can't regulate. A lot of this stuff is just gross, and like it shouldn't take like the government to quote unquote regulate it,
Yeah. One thing that it made me think as you were talking about that is the notion of ethics in relation to kind of transparency. And if there's anything that I thought was seemingly, I guess, ethical about our forays into Venezuela, it was at least we weren't lying about our intention. And
that
I found
was a little
that
refreshing.
It was, like, we want the oil, we're going to run the country, we'll give it back when we say so, we have all the power, and at least it wasn't
it
like
wasn't a crusade
bullshit.
for freedom.
Right. We're bringing freedom to the Middle East.
Yeah, no, that is true. But I do think it's like there should be a social cost to Elon Musk for his, grok undressing AOC. Like there should be. Like in a healthy society, I do believe that there are curative functions that are not part of the state. And perhaps there is a bit of a return to that. Maybe I'm being too moralistic, but do we have a good product of 2026?
My good product, I by the way, I watched with interest. It was maybe one of the best football games of the year was on Sunday, and it was the Pittsburgh-Baltimore game. And it was really an incredible game. And one thing that I noticed afterwards is apparently Pittsburgh's a real football town. They love their Steelers, and so does the church, apparently. It's also a very Catholic town. And before the game, a Catholic priest came out with like a little plastic water bottle and sprayed the end zone with holy water, which I guess wouldn't surprise you as a Catholic Eagles fan.
That's like COVID.
That seems perfectly normal. I guess
there's an enduring image of COVID of a Catholic priest baptizing a child with a water gun.
Yeah. Well, in this case, what was even more interesting about it was the layup of a field goal from the 40-yard line that would have won the game for Baltimore was, mysteriously wide. And many, many people in Pittsburgh would attribute it to that act of faith, of spraying down the end zone. So
that's cool.
Something to watch.
I'm not sure if it's accurate, but it's cool.
Well, you look for things, you wonder, when my kids are a little bit older now, and as, when Christmas come around, all the sort of childhood traditions of, opening gifts and the tree and all that stuff are less important. One thing I did this year that was, meaningful and surprisingly so was I took them all to see, we're all kind of Bills fans, and we went to Buffalo to see the game against the Eagles. So it was, a huge, huge effort to get to the crazy, insane JFK airport, wade through the crowds, get on the plane, get to Buffalo, check into the hotel. It was pouring rain. And we bought, these kind of Buffalo Bills garbage bags. I had jeans on. We went briefly to the the tailgating, which is like Burning Man. It's insane. And we sat in rain for 3 hours and watched our team lose. And my kids all reported back to me, Brian, that it was one of the best things that we've ever done together.
Beautiful
And
thing.
I, NFL as a kind of center to fandom and community is an incredible thing. The game of football is great. We gambled for sure. This idea of sports tourism is a big thing for me, and we're going to do it more often in 26 and 27. We're going to try to see more games on the road and use it as an opportunity to kind of hang out together. And I love it.
Yeah, it's a great excuse. I know when the Eagles, the schedule just came out, everyone sort of looks at it to see where the warm weather plays. This is also another reason you mentioned Pittsburgh being a great sports town. You basically can't have a great sports town if you have great weather. Like there's trade-offs to everything in life. If you live in San Diego, you're going to have shitty sports scene. If you live in Miami, forget it. Because if you live in LA, also forget it. A terrible sports town. Maybe
although I'm dying to go to see a game at SoFi.
Really?
Yeah,
okay.
That's a spectacular.
Okay,
place.
so a game at SoFi. Okay, so if God willing, the Eagles, it's not going to happen because his offense is terrible, get to the finals against the Rams, and they go to SoFi. Half the stadium, the Rams are going to have to do a silent count at home because half the stadium is going to be the Eagles fans. I mean, going to watch the Eagles in late January in LA versus being in Northeast Philly, forget it. You just book the trip.
I bumped into a lot of Eagles fans, and they were, I thought they were going to beat me up. They were great.
Okay, good. Yeah, there's a lot of knuckleheads, but they don't travel. I don't think they're not dropping. They're not going to SoFi. They're not even going to Buffalo. They're staying at home.
That's it for this episode of People versus Algorithms, where each week we uncover patterns shaping media, culture, and technology. Big thanks, as always, to our producer, Vanya Arsenov. She always makes us a little clearer and more understandable, and we appreciate her very, very much. If you're enjoying these conversations, we'd love for you to leave us a review. It helps us get the word out and keeps our community growing. Remember, you can find People vs. Algorithms on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and now on YouTube. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next week. All right, Brian, good to see you. Safe travels.
All right, good to see you.
Enjoy CES.
Okay. Thank you, Troy. Bye.
Ciao.